He rushed his son to the hospital, desperate to save him. But one blood test exposed more than a diagnosis. It cracked open a secret buried for years. David thought he had built the perfect life, a loving wife, 3 beautiful children, and a future as secure as his wealth. But when neither he nor his wife matched their son's blood type, the doubt began to fester. So he did what any man would do. He asked for the truth. And the truth, let's just say, ended his life as he knew it. On the day he left the hospital with the DNA results in hand, a truck came out of nowhere. No warning, no mercy. Bang! By the time the wreckage was cleared, David was neither dead nor alive. But what if he wasn't? What happens when the lie you've built your life on finally looks you in the face? Welcome to the Judge Stories, where every twist cuts deep and every ending hits harder than fiction. If you love betrayal, hidden truths, and poetic justice, stay right here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this story, it's about to explode. Lagos mornings had a rhythm. Birds chirped faintly over the hum of generators, the clinking of spoons echoed from the kitchen, and in the Oho household, laughter rang out like music. David sat at the edge of the dining table, one hand around a steaming cup of coffee, the other flipping through business alerts on his phone. Across from him, 5-year-old Junior drummed his plastic spoon on the edge of his cereal bowl, singing off-key to a cartoon theme song. His wife, Linda, breezed between kitchen counters in a silky house robe, packing lunchboxes and humming along. Everything looked perfect. Until it wasn't. The moment was so fast it sliced through the morning like broken glass. Junior's spoon slipped from his hand, his smile faded mid-note. He blinked once, then twice, then slumped sideways in his chair. "Junior?" David dropped his phone. Linda screamed. In seconds, David had the boy in his arms. Junior's body burned with fever, his skin pale, lips dry and twitching. "Call the driver," David barked, bolting toward the door. "Now!" The staff scrambled, shoes slammed the floor. Within minutes, their black SUV screeched out of the compound, horn blaring through the lecky traffic. David cradled Junior in the back seat, whispering over and over, "You're okay, son. Stay with me. Just hold on." At Greencrest Specialist Hospital, the ER burst into motion. "Possible febrile seizure, collapsed at home," the nurse announced as they wheeled Junior in. Dr. Amaka, a young but composed pediatrician, swept into the room. Vitals were taken, fever spiking at 41 degrees Celsius, blood drawn, IV fluids connected. David paced outside the emergency room like a man possessed. His heart beat in double time, his shirt stuck to his back with sweat. Linda sat quietly, hands shaking, muttering silent prayers as the wall clock ticked on painfully loud in the silence. 30 minutes passed. Dr. Amaka finally stepped out, clipboard in hand, expression tight. "We've stabilized him for now," she began softly, "but the initial tests show signs of hemolytic anemia. He'll need a blood transfusion, urgently." David stood immediately. "Take mine." Dr. Amaka nodded. "We'll test you now." In the lab, David rolled up his sleeve without a word. A nurse drew his blood and left. Time crawled. He didn't sit, didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on the swinging doors between him and his son. When Dr. Amaka returned, her voice was hesitant. "Mr. Oho, we ran your blood type. You're Group O." David nodded. "And? Your son is Group B. That's not compatible." David frowned. "So what does that mean?" Linda stood abruptly. "Then test me." They did. 10 minutes later, another result. Group A. Something shattered inside David. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. "We'll try to source from the National Blood Bank," the doctor added quickly. "We won't let him slip." That night, David sat alone in the hospital chapel. He wasn't a religious man, but silence was the only thing keeping him sane. His mind spiraled. O and A don't make B. It's not possible. And yet, there his son lay, unconscious, needing a blood type that neither parent could provide. David muttered to himself, "It doesn't mean anything, just one strange detail, could be a fluke. Junior is my son." But the voice inside him, the quiet, brutal one, whispered back, "What if he's not?" He clenched his jaw, pulled out his phone, and typed into Google, "Can two parents with O and A blood types have a child with B?" The answer blinked back at him, "No." He swallowed hard. Still, he didn't want to believe it. Not yet. But he needed the truth. The next morning, before the sun fully rose over Victoria Island, David walked into a private diagnostic lab. Quiet, discreet. He handed over a sample of his own saliva and a cotton swab from Junior's toothbrush. "Run a DNA paternity test," he said. "And don't call this number. Email me when it's ready." The lab technician nodded. David stepped back out into the bright Lagos morning, but to him the world had already gone dark. The results arrived 3 days later. It was a quiet night, the kind that Lagos rarely offered. No honking danfos, no distant parties, just the occasional buzz of a passing Okada. David sat alone in his home office, the light from his laptop casting a pale glow across his face. His phone pinged. Subject: confidential DNA paternity result. David Oho. Junior Oho. His chest tightened. For a moment he didn't move. The cursor hovered over the email like a warning. When he finally clicked it open, the screen blinked. Probability of paternity, 0%. Conclusion: David Oho is not the biological father of Junior Oho. The air left his lungs. His hands dropped from the keyboard. Silence crushed him. He stared blankly at the screen, blinking but not seeing. His brain tried to rationalize it, a lab error, a technical glitch, but the truth stood firm, cold, mathematical, undeniable. Junior wasn't his son. David didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, hands clasped, replaying every memory: the first time Junior called him Daddy, the birthday parties, the hospital checkups, the nights he stayed awake nursing a fever, the tiny hands, the trust in the boy's eyes. But trust didn't change DNA. When the morning came, David did what he knew had to be done. He got Junior discharged early. The boy was stable now. He carried his son out of the hospital, heart torn between love and betrayal. At home, Linda rushed to greet them. "You're back already?" she asked, her voice high-pitched with relief. David gave a tight nod. "He's resting now." Linda reached out to touch his arm, but David pulled back gently. "We'll talk later," he said. "Let him sleep." That night, after dinner, David stepped out onto the balcony, where the city lights twinkled like stars, struggling to stay alive. Linda joined him quietly. "What's wrong?" she asked. David didn't look at her. "Is there anything you want to tell me, Linda?" She hesitated. "About what?" "I'm giving you a chance to be honest," he said softly, but his tone carried steel. "Is there anything you need to tell me about our son?" She frowned, arms folding across her chest. "No," she said. "Why? What's going on?" David studied her face. He wanted to believe her, desperately. But the lie was too clean, too rehearsed. He nodded once. "All right." The next morning, Linda made a call. The nurse on the other end answered quickly, almost too quickly. "Is it true?" Linda whispered. "Did he do a test?" The nurse, a woman Linda had showered with gifts for years, sighed. "Yes, he ran a DNA test the day after the transfusion failed. I wasn't supposed to tell you, but—" Linda's legs nearly buckled. She ended the call and dialed another number. "Tony." He picked up on the second ring, his voice deep, half asleep. "Linda?" "We have a problem," she said, eyes darting toward the hallway. "A big one." Tony grunted. "Talk." "He knows about Junior." Silence. "He took Junior for a DNA test. He didn't say anything, but he knows. And if he tests the other two—" "He can't," Tony cut in. "You need to keep him calm." "I don't think I can. I think he's already suspicious." There was a pause, then Tony's voice dropped. "Then we handle it, before he finds out everything." That same day, David returned to the hospital, but not with Junior. He handed over toothbrushes and combs, each neatly labeled with his children's names. "I want full paternity tests on both of them," he told the lab. The nurse who had taken his samples nodded professionally, but the moment David left, she picked up her phone. Linda answered instantly. "He just dropped off the other kids' samples." Linda's world tilted. She hung up and called Tony again. "He's testing all of them. I'm going to lose everything." Tony was quiet for a beat. Then, "Leave it to me." Tony paced the living room of his cramped bungalow in Iyana Ipaja, chain-smoking and cursing under his breath. He hadn't heard from Linda in months, not like this. She always kept her calls short, careful, layered with innocence, but now, her voice had cracked. She sounded scared, the kind of fear that smelled like loss. He hated loss. She'd been the best thing that ever happened to him, and when she married David, the rich boy from Victoria Island, Tony didn't mind. In fact, he encouraged it. Her marriage meant access to money, comfort, and resources he could never earn legally. But now David was sniffing too close to the truth. And Tony had worked too hard to lose everything because one rich man wanted answers. Back in Lekki, Linda paced their polished marble floors, phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through recent bank transfers. David had restricted the household account. She could feel it. She opened the kids' wardrobe. Everything still looked the same, the toys, the clothes, the photos on the wall. But something had shifted. David had shifted. The way he looked at her, like he saw straight through her. What if he takes the kids? What if I lose the house? She reached for her phone again and texted, "Linda, you have to stop him. I'm begging you. If he finds out about both of them, it's over, for all of us." Tony replied within seconds. "Tony, meet me. We talk face to face." Later that night, they met at an unfinished building off Allen Avenue. Tony arrived on a black motorcycle, helmet tucked under his arm. Linda stood waiting in a hoodie and dark glasses, like someone on the run. "You're slipping," he said without greeting. "You should have warned me years ago." "I didn't think he'd ever test them," she hissed. Tony lit a cigarette and exhaled slowly. "He already knows about Junior. If he finds out about the others, you think he'll still call you wife?" Linda looked down. "Let me ask you something," Tony continued, voice low. "Who's been paying your rent, covering my debts, buying your designer perfumes? You think I want that to end?" "Of course not," she whispered. "Then we need to fix this, now." Linda swallowed hard. "What? What do you want to do?" Tony flicked the cigarette to the ground. "I have a guy, truck driver, doesn't ask questions. You just say when." Her heart dropped. "You want to kill him?" "No," Tony said with a dark grin. "I want him gone." The next morning, David walked out of the hospital's underground parking lot, unaware that a man in a faded green cap was watching him from a distance, phone pressed to his ear. "He's leaving now," the voice said. "Silver SUV, alone." On the other end, Tony nodded. "Truck's ready?" "Already on the route." Tony ended the call and lit another cigarette. If David was going to dig up the past, he wouldn't live long enough to find what was buried. David left the hospital with an envelope in his briefcase, 2 freshly sealed DNA test forms. His hands never touched them, not yet. He needed to get home, clear his head, then read them alone. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. Lagos traffic, usually his greatest annoyance, was strangely light. He barely noticed the looming truck behind him as he crossed the Falamo Bridge. It had trailed him since he exited the hospital gate, keeping pace, never overtaking, never falling too far behind. Until it struck. Without warning, the truck swerved violently into David's lane. He saw it in flashes, a horn blaring, headlights blinding, the shriek of tearing metal. His SUV spun off the road, slammed into the median, flipped, then landed in a heap of crushed steel. Everything went black. When David woke up, he was surrounded by fluorescent light and the faint scent of antiseptic. Pain thundered through his ribs. His head felt like it had been split open. "Easy," A familiar voice said, "You're safe now." He blinked. Standing over him was Dr. Kelvin, a name from another life. University of Ibadan, class of 2003. They hadn't spoken in years. "Kelvin?" David whispered. The doctor smiled grimly. "You were lucky. If that truck had hit 2 seconds earlier, you wouldn't be here." David tried to sit up, but winced. Kelvin leaned in. "The paramedics brought you here. I was on shift. When I saw your name on the intake sheet, I made sure everything was handled privately." David's eyes sharpened. "Does anyone know I'm alive?" Kelvin shook his head. "Only my team, and I trust them." David exhaled shakily. "Good, keep it that way." Kelvin frowned. "Why?" David looked away, voice barely above a whisper. "Because I don't think that was an accident." Hours later, as news of the accident broke, Linda wept into a silk handkerchief as reporters camped outside the mansion. "They said it was instant," the officer told her. "There was a significant trauma. We advise a closed casket." Linda clutched her chest, collapsing into fake sobs as the cameras flashed. Behind her, Tony placed a firm hand on her shoulder, playing the grieving friend. Inside, the house staff whispered. Outside, social media mourned. But in a quiet room on the mainland, David sat upright in a hospital bed, staring at the wall. Rage simmered beneath his bandages. He had no proof, not yet. But something told him they knew. And if they were willing to kill him to protect a lie, then he was done protecting anything. The sun rose that morning, but not for David. The newspapers called it a tragic loss. Social media flooded with tributes. "He was a good man," they wrote, "a quiet philanthropist, a loving father." Photos of David in corporate suits and family portraits lit up every feed in Lagos. But behind the closed doors of the Oho mansion, the atmosphere was disturbingly calm. Linda wore black, designer lace dripping with pearls. She sobbed dutifully through the short service. Beside her, Tony stood in a crisp kaftan, dark sunglasses hiding the arrogance in his eyes. The casket was sealed by doctor's recommendation. "Too disfigured," they said. "She didn't ask to see the body. She didn't need to." The nurse who called her had already confirmed David didn't survive. She had won. Or so she thought. On the other side of the city, inside a modest apartment hidden in a private hospital compound, David sat on the edge of a hospital bed, watching his own funeral live-streamed on YouTube. He didn't cry, he didn't blink, he just watched. His lawyer, Mr. Owolabi, stood beside him, holding a sealed folder. "As instructed, I've locked 70% of your accounts," he said. "Only 30% is accessible for the next 30 days. David nodded. "Let her have a taste." The lawyer hesitated. "And after 30 days? David's voice was cold. "Freeze everything. We'll see what's left of her loyalty after that." In the days that followed, the Oho mansion transformed. Tony moved in like a king returning to his palace. He slept in David's bed, wore David's watches, took the children out in David's SUV. He and Linda hosted loud parties at night. Champagne bottles clinked, money flowed, staff were told to adjust. Only the youngest child, Junior, seemed confused. "Where's Daddy?" he asked one night. Linda kissed his forehead, plastering on a smile. "Daddy's with the angels, baby." But David wasn't with the angels. He was in a safe house. Watching, recording. By the second week, he had what he needed. Bank records showing massive withdrawals and transfers. Surveillance footage of Tony using David's security keycard. A secret recording from a hidden camera planted at the funeral reception. Tony laughing, drunk, boasting to a friend. "She was worth more as a widow. Now we eat good for life." David leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "They tried to bury me," he muttered, "but they didn't know I was a seed." It was time to go to the police. David walked into the Zone 2 Police Command building in Onikan with a file tucked under his arm and a fire in his chest. For 2 weeks, he had watched from the shadows while the people he loved turned his home into a circus. Now he had names, he had numbers, he had proof. The question wasn't if justice would come, it was how hard it would land. The officer in charge, Superintendent Falarin, sat back after reviewing the documents. "You're saying your wife and her lover tried to kill you? For your money?" he asked slowly. "I'm saying they did more than try," David replied. "They arranged the truck, paid off a driver, held a funeral, moved into my house, and are now living off my name." Falarin nodded. "We'll need to verify everything." David pulled out a flash drive. "Every recording, every transfer, it's all here." Meanwhile, back in Lekki, Linda swirled a glass of wine while Tony danced with their first daughter in the living room. Afrobeats boomed through the house. Life was good, or at least it looked that way. Linda's phone buzzed. "Bank alert. Access to account ending 5629 has been restricted." She blinked. Another buzz. "Access denied. David's lawyer must have locked the accounts," she muttered. Tony laughed. "Let him. We still have enough." But Linda wasn't laughing. Something in her gut twisted. Something felt unfinished. "What if he found out about the others?" she whispered. Tony paused. And for the first time, he looked unsure. The next morning, police showed up at the mansion in plain clothes. The staff pretended not to watch as officers knocked on the gate. "Mrs. Oho, we'd like you to come with us. Just a few questions." "About what?" "Your husband." Linda blinked. "My late husband?" One officer raised a brow. "Just come along, Ma." She didn't know that across the road, parked behind tinted glass, David was watching for the first time in weeks as she panicked. He said nothing. Just waited. Inside the interrogation room, Linda faced a cold metal table and the growing weight of silence. Tony was called in hours later. He swaggered in, confident, asking for a lawyer. But when the officers pressed play on the audio recording his own voice boasting about David's death, his smile cracked. This is edited." Superintendent Falarin leaned forward. "So is the bank transfer fake? The $5 million you paid to the truck driver's wife?" Tony's hands twitched. Linda's lip trembled. Then the door opened. And David walked in, alive, unburned, unforgiving. Linda screamed. Tony stood, white as ash. The room froze. "You're dead," she gasped. "No," David said quietly, "just patient." He turned to the officers. "They can go now. I've seen what I needed to see." And with that, he walked out. The headlines came fast and loud. "Business tycoon's wife and lover arrested for staged murder plot." "Lagos socialite caught living with dead husband's killer." By the next morning, the story was everywhere. TikTok clips, Instagram reels, Twitter threads. Even WhatsApp aunties groups had forwarded the projector video like gospel. His voice notes became memes. Edits of Linda fainting in the interrogation room went viral. David didn't leave his apartment for 2 days. When he finally did, it wasn't for fresh air, it was because someone was banging at the door. Superintendent Falarin met him in the hallway, holding a printed charge sheet. "They're both being arraigned this afternoon. Charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The truck driver confessed too. He gave up everything: the payment, the plan, even the fake brake failure." David nodded. "And the children?" "They're safe. Social services called. But that's up to you." He didn't respond. "Not yet." At the courthouse, Linda was nearly unrecognizable. No makeup, wrinkled gown, handcuffed and shaking. She stared straight ahead, eyes wide and hollow. Tony sat beside her, jaw clenched, like a man who had realized far too late that charm couldn't save him this time. The courtroom buzzed with press and whispers. When the judge finally read the charges aloud, neither of them spoke. They couldn't. The walls had closed in. Bail was denied. They were remanded to Ikoyi prison. And just like that, it was over. Almost. That evening, David sat on the edge of Junior's bed, watching the boy draw with crayons. The child had no idea what had happened. No idea how close he came to losing everything. David gently pulled a folded envelope from his back pocket. Inside was the truth, the DNA tests, the betrayal, his decision. He looked down at the boy. "One day you'll understand all of this," he said softly, "but for now, I just want you to grow up loved." Junior looked up. "Daddy?" David smiled weakly. "Yes. Can we have spaghetti tomorrow?" He chuckled. "Anything you want." Silence had returned to the Oho mansion, but it wasn't peace. The laughter was gone, so were the parties. No more designer perfumes scattered across the counter. No Tony, no Linda. Only David, and the 3 children who had no idea the truth had torn their world apart. He started with the basics: school runs, breakfast duty, bedtime prayers. Junior liked to be carried on his back even though he was too big. Amara, the eldest, now stared too long at doors and windows, as if waiting for someone who wasn't coming. And Daniel, quiet, observant Daniel, had started drawing pictures of broken houses. They were grieving something they couldn't name. And so was David. Every day he woke up with a single choice: to see them as his or to see them as the children of the woman who betrayed him. Every day he chose them. One night, Amara knocked gently on his bedroom door. "Daddy?" He looked up from the envelope in his lap, the one he'd never opened, in front of them. "Yes?" She stepped in, holding a piece of paper. It was a school assignment. "Who is your hero?" And she had written his name. "Even though I made mistakes," she said quietly, "you never shouted. You stayed." David blinked rapidly. "I will always stay." Her arms wrapped around him. He held her like a lifeline. He didn't need a DNA test to feel what he felt. Later he returned to his study and opened the drawer. Inside was the sealed letter he had once written to Junior. He added something new beneath it. "I don't know if you'll ever ask, but if you do, I want you to know I stayed. Not because it was easy, but because you were worth it. All of you." 3 years passed. The house no longer whispered of betrayal. It echoed with cartoons, birthday songs, and the thud of running feet. The wounds had not disappeared, but they had closed. David rebuilt his business slowly, declining every media interview about the case. He didn't want to be famous for surviving. He just wanted to live again for the children. Linda and Tony had been sentenced. 15 years, no parole. Occasionally, Linda wrote letters from prison. He never opened them, not because he hated her, but because there was nothing left to say. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer, 12-year-old Amara found an old envelope, thick, yellowed, and sealed with David's signature. She brought it to him. "Should I open it?" David smiled. "Not yet. One day when you're ready." But that night, after the kids were asleep, he opened it himself for the first time in years. He read the letter slowly, like revisiting an old version of himself. Jaden. His real name was Junior, but David always used Jaden when writing to him. "I met someone once who gave you life, but he knew he couldn't give you more than that. So he stepped back, not because he didn't care, but because he believed you already had everything you needed. I hope that someday, when the time is right, you'll read this and understand that fatherhood is not just about blood. It's about who stayed, who fought, and who showed up every single day. And I'm proud to say, that was me." "Dad." David folded the letter, eyes wet, heart quiet. The past had left scars, but the future was clean. This was the Judge Stories. If this story moved you, don't just watch, share. Subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life narratives of justice, legacy, and poetic revenge. Because here, truth always finds its voice. We'll see you in the next one.